Tilea's Troubles, Part 41. New Arrivals. Chapter 1. Remas. Summer's End, 2402. One by one the companies halted, forming a line 30 or so yards from the city walls. The foreigners were as unexpected as they were unusual to most citizens, but it was clear that Captain General Duke Scaringella had been expecting them, for although the garrison soldiers were mustered upon the walls, they showed no sense of urgency or concern, while the newcomers below were manoeuvring as if on parade, not in preparation to launch an assault. Within an hour, word had spread through the city. These were the infamous Sons of the Desert, a mercenary army commanded by General Gedik Mamidou. To a man, they hailed from Araby, beyond the Black Gulf, and never before had so many of such mustered and marched together in Tilea. Each company wore its own particular style of clothing, nothing at all like the fashions favoured in Tilea. The officers strode ahead, and as each body of men came up, they raised their hands to signal the halt, thereby neatly arraying the rank and file. They included a regiment swathed in black, with polished helmets and bright steel shield rims shining in the sunlight, commanded by a captain clad in a coat hemmed in intricate silver lace. Their standard bore the text of a vow in the Arabian tongue, albeit one which might be interpreted in several different ways, so that it was rarely broken, howsoever the company acted. As they halted, they drew their blades with a theatrical flourish and gave a guttural cry that seemed to be half laugh, half curse. Another company, spearmen in white linen decorated with red patches and bands and a scattering of chainmail coats, halted tiredly, their captain gesturing left to signal that they should dress up to the neighbouring body. As they did so, their drummer beat a final flourish, rounded off satisfactorily with a clash of a pair of cymbals from his fellow musician. The regiment to their right sported clothes of silver-grey cloth and much more armour, being both scale and mail. They too bore spears, many of which were viciously barbed. Again, with an exactly similar call, their drummer signalled the moment they were to halt. This was the heaviest foot regiment in the army, considered the best of its soldiers. Before the Arabians was the southern entrance to the city of Remas, between two round-fronted towers, fashioned like the walls from huge blocks of stone. Soldiers watched from almost every gap in the crenellations, some armed with crossbows, others with great swords, while the muzzles of two iron cannons peeked over the top of the gate towers. More than half the garrison soldiers sported a red plume to finish off their brightly hued livery. Many were Remans born and bred, for the traditionally foreign mercenary army of Remas had marched away almost to a man upon the Archlector's holy war against the vampires in the north. And yet, nearly all these men had the look of ultramontane soldiers, with hair and beards cropped in the fashion favoured by the Empire's mercenaries. The northern style had become de rigueur amongst the Archlector's palace guard, and had caught on among the newly raised native troops. It had now become the look of a Reman soldier, rather than that of a particular form of mercenary. Duke Scaringella had already ridden out of the gates, accompanied by a small bodyguard. The herald Vittore rode by his side, bearing the cross-keyed colours of the Reman Church of Moor, and announced the general with sharp blasts upon his brass horn. On the other side rode a Morite cleric, bearing the holy relic of Saint Saladro's forefinger, the very same finger he laid on the demon Hagblood's tongue, which was suitably encased in silver and mounted upon a staff. The Duke wore ornate armour, his horse brightly caparisoned in enamelled barding, with a matching lance and a shield bearing the keys to Moor's garden. As he was here to welcome the new arrivals, he wore a smile rather than a helm. Those who looked closely could see it was a rather fixed expression, a somewhat feigned good humour, which faltered slightly as he flinched at the repeated sounding of Vittore's horn. The mercenary General Gedik Mamidou was atop a camel, also accompanied by a standard-bearer, although in his case the bodyguard behind him was an entire army. He wore unadorned, dull chainmail and clothes of plain blue and white, appearing every bit a fighting man. The only decorations he carried were the silken tassels upon his shield. It was a fashion shared by several of his camel riders, so even that was not a personal affectation. Before Duke Scaringella could begin his formal welcome address, the Arabian mercenary spoke. "I have been told we are late to the feast. I hope, my noble friend, you will forgive the tardiness. It was not our doing." The Duke was confused. Did Mamidou mean the food now being prepared to entertain the Arabian officers? "Feast?" he asked. Mamidou laughed. "I chose the wrong words for my joke, I think. I should have said fight. No one would wish to feast upon the foul flesh of the undead. Are we too late for your holy war?" Now the Duke understood. "A little late, perhaps, but I assure you, in no way unwelcome. I have orders from the Archlector. He means to put you to use immediately." "Ah, yes, of course. We are paid to fight, and we intend to earn that pay." Mamidou gestured to the army behind him. "The sons of the desert are at your service, sent by our most generous employer, Lord D'Alessio Falcone." "Did not King Ferronzo send you hither?" asked the Duke. "We came from Lucini, yes, for we served him last. But Lord Alessio paid the king handsomely to release us from our contract, and then found money enough to hire us. The cause might be holy, but the best warriors still need paying. I think Rimas has a very good and generous friend in Porto Maggiore." "Of that I have no doubt," said the general, perhaps hoping to give the impression of being better informed than he obviously was. "You and your officers are, of course, warmly welcome to lodge within the city, and indeed I can promise a feast. Your men will be directed to their own quarters, where they might rest a day or so. But you must not tarry, for although Viadaza is already taken, you are needed for the battles ahead. His Holiness intends to outnumber and overwhelm the foe, and this he cannot do until you join him. I thank you, noble lord, for what we are about to receive, and I can assure you any apparent tardiness on our behalf was not of our doing, but rather a consequence of the interminable wranglings of the chancellors and clerks of Lucini and Porto Maggiore." Tilea's Troubles, Part 41, New Arrivals, Chapter 2, Scorcio, Summer's End, 2402. What do you mean Scorcio is taken?" asked the acting governor of Trantio, the wizard Venuto Bellastra, fixing his eyes on the fidgeting, shirtless militiaman before him. The fellow's foul stench had got the interrogation off to a bad start, and now it threatened to become even more uncomfortable. Clearly irritated, Bellastra asked another question, without even waiting for an answer to his first. "Are you saying the Remans have turned against Lord Silvano?" The filthy scorcher looked confused. No, your honour," the man stuttered. "The Remans came and went, to a man, and Lord Silvano with them, north, as they always intended, to fight the horrors." "I know," snapped Bellastra, "as if the Archlector would lead an army to attack a living town. It is preposterous on every level. His blessed soldiers would surely refuse such a command, while his own reputation would be ruined. Never mind that he would be turning his back on the real danger." Bellastra's irritation had clouded the fact that it was he himself who had asked if it was so. Then he suddenly turned pale, as he remembered how Viadaza had fallen to the undead in the very same week that its own brave, crusading army was victorious in battle, killing the vampire duke. Had the vampires played the same trick again? Had they outflanked the Archlector? Were they already south of the Holy Army? Were they already within the bounds of the Trantine state? He stabbed a finger at the Scorcian. "Are you saying the vampires have passed them by?" The militiaman furrowed his brow. No, not vampires, your honour. Bruti, hundreds of them, more. Brutes and beasts and all manner of ogreish things." In that instant, Bellastra went from fearful befuddlement to sickening understanding. Of course it was brutes. There had been reports of a large force of ogre mercenaries on the Via Nano, some saying it was the infamous Manglers band come through the mountains from the border princes. Country folk from the northern reaches of the Trantine hills had arrived at the city by the score, seeking refuge from the monstrous army. When the scouts returned to report they could find no such army, Bellastra had presumed all the fuss had arisen from a mess of fearful rumours. He had said so much to Lord Silvano, that the sighting of some caravan guards had surely been enlarged into an army, or the tale of a tavern brawl bloated into a battle. He had allowed himself to wax lyrical with the young, impressionable lord, about how the situation might be compared to a child's account of snarling kittens being twisted into a tale of sabre-toothed tigers. Lord Silvano had laughed. He had laughed. It was not so funny now. The militiaman was still talking. And they had big guns. It wasn't them that hold the walls, though, for that they had a huge iron piece strapped to the back of some grey-skinned monster. But mind you, even that didn't do all the work, just weakened and cracked the stones so that the biggest of the bruti could bash their way through using massive iron-bound clubs. And all the while they hurled filth and jaggedy bits over the walls from a goblin crude thrower on the back of another hulking beast. Then, for a moment, they stopped, as if to rest. All of them, which made us wonder. But then came the shouted command, and they came in, pouring through the gaps. Ballastra felt light-headed. This was all his fault. It was he who had advised the young Lord Silvano to leave Trantio, to join the Archlector's holy army, even to take his own army with him. What had he been thinking? Of course, in truth, he knew full well what his motivations had been. With the young lord gone, he could rule in his stead, acting governor of the entire city-state of ancient and famous Trantio. He had imagined 100 ways in which to enrich himself, the opportunities tumbling over each other in their abundance. Young Lord Silvano had hesitated, asking what would his father think. After all, the Duke had ordered his son to ensure Trantio was well defended, and not to be drawn easily into a holy war that did not need him, especially when there were threats enough all around, not only from the north. As Silvano considered the matter, Ballastra had feared his chance was slipping away. "There was no stopping them," the Scorsian was saying. "They queued outside, as those at the front climbed over the rubble. Their blades were as big as men, bigger even, and they had banners made of grisly skulls." Ballastra had worked on the young lord, with words of assurance and encouragement. His father would be proud of him, for he could make his name in battle, not any battle, but holy war in the name of More. Silvano said something about his brother, his father's terrible loss, how he was now the only surviving heir, but Ballastra had pressed on with his persuasions. "This is your chance, as Prince of Pavona, a true servant of More, the King of Gods, to show the strength of your faith. The Remans will see that you are blessed, and that there is neither the slightest schism nor heresy in the Church of Pavona, but only truth and wisdom. And then they too should accept the full ascendancy of More." Trembling as he spoke, words were still pouring from the soldier's mouth. "I never saw one so big before, and I've been to Viadaza 3 times. The third to enter was laird in iron plates, a right clattering mess of them. All the rest were in awe of him, kept out of his way. And as he came inside, he crushed the broken bodies of the dead and wounded beneath his feet. They had goblins with them, scurrying around like rats they were, looting from the fallen." Ballastra was still remembering. The young lord had admitted he dare not go alone, nor with only a petty force at his command. And again, Ballastra had realised his chance was slipping away, and so he advised the young lord to take all he wanted. "None should be half-hearted in the service of More, my lord, nor think it foolish to use all the strength they have at their disposal to defeat that which threatens all of Tilea. Your father would surely think you most remiss not to equip yourself fully for battle. He is not a man for half measures, and nor would he wish you to be." Still, Lord Silvano had worn an expression of concern, and so it was Ballastra had played his final card. "I can stay here," he had said, knowing the young lord was too young and naive to hear the truth behind his words. "I can stay here to ensure Trantio's obedience. Just leave me some guns, and the garrison soldiers who were once Compagno del Sole, and de Lazaro, of course. He and I would hardly be welcome among the Holy Army's priests anyway, for they fight with prayers, not spells. You should take all the veterans with you, the best of the Pavonans, those who have fought for both your father and your brother. They're skilled in arms and afraid of nothing. Let the Archlector witness what you and they can do. Make him grateful to you personally. Become famous in your own right. Taste glory, and earn the respect of the whole of Tilea. This is your chance, my lord." Ballastra had started to believe it himself. Silvano would surely thrive in war, like his noble father, but not his brother, while he himself would prosper from all he could wring from Trantio. And Duke Guidobaldo was hardly likely to complain, for Ballastra would ensure to fill his coffers too. There was plenty enough in Trantio to enrich them both. "Rampaging through the town," the Scorcian was saying, wringing his hands. "There were none that could stand in their way. If a door was barred, they tore it off. If a window was shuttered, they just punched it through. They killed everyone they found. Every man, woman and child, even the beasts. They made mountains of flesh for the feast." Now, thought Balastra, all could be lost. If the brutes came south to Trantio, it would ruin all his plans. His reputation would be destroyed, the wealth of Trantio stolen, and his own life in peril from the Duke's anger. What now? Was there any way to salvage his honour, or should he look simply to saving his life? "Many folk hid. Well, they tried," continued the militiaman, wincing in a distracting manner. "It worked for me, maybe for some of the others too. I climbed into a privy, as I reckon Bruty don't bother with such niceties, just go wherever they like. Besides, the stink would make them think there was no food to be found. I stayed inside until dark." Balastra now knew why the man stank, and why he had discarded his shirt. The knowledge did not in any way lessen the stench. "But I could still hear them in the streets," the Scorchian continued. "They played with anyone they found, like they were nothing more than puppets or rag dolls, laughing so loud and inventing cruel and bloody sports before they killed them." Balastra shook his head, as if attempting to empty it of upsetting thoughts. He should not give up so easily. Great men, rich men, did not weep and wail at the first hurdle. His end had not yet come. He still ruled Trantio. Maybe there was a way to save himself, even prosper. He held up his hand to silence the militiaman. "Who commanded them?" he demanded. The militiaman shrugged, a nervous spasm twisting his face like a stage buffoon. "Did you hear a name? Did you hear the name Mangler?" "No, I don't think so, Your Honour. Not that name." "Any name, then?" The militiaman grimaced alarmingly, then answered. Aye, there was a name, Your Honour. I've heard it before, in stories about Campagrotta. They chanted it, very loud, over and over. Razger, Razger, Razger."